given the amount of dynamism in this meeting and people running around and doing very dynamic presentations like Eric, I thought I'd better take the walking mic to sort of keep up with that. So thank you very much. And I think Theo has really done a very nice job in terms of lining us up for these presentations. I think Eric really did a great job in sort of setting up the theme, making the link to productivity, which is going to save me some time not having to do that because he did that much better than I could do it. And it also allows me now to move straight away from sort of, the very sort of focus level that Eric had on what does IT mean for growth in a company and what is it that it can help companies to become more profitable, to become more productive. For me to actually take it to a sort of, more macroeconomic level and say, what does that actually mean for the growth of the economy? What does it mean for the growth of the US economy, which Eric very briefly addressed in the beginning of his presentation? But also, what does it mean for sort of differences in growth between economies in the global, in the world economy, and what does it mean over time? Because as a matter of fact, we have seen some really important developments. Eric already referred to the recession and the fact that productivity growth in the United States during the recession year last year has actually been going up very substantially. But it's been one of the exceptions because normally during recessions we actually see productivity slowing down, and that's what we have seen in most of the rest of the world, but not everywhere. For example, in emerging economies, we have seen productivity actually accelerating. Another thing that has been going on is if you go a little bit beyond the recession, then we actually have seen, and I'm going to show that to you with some numbers, that since sort of the past 3-4 years in the US and also in Europe, we have actually seen the contribution of IT to productivity growth slowing down a little. It looks like this this great phase that we had from 1995 to 2005 isn't that great right now, and some people have actually been arguing, well, this was it really, the time of IT contribution to productivity is over. And I will argue that that really I don't think is the case, but we have to think about what is going on and what is it that will actually move us to a next stage where information technology can continue to contribute to growth. So hence the title of my presentation, Reevaluating the Contribution of Innovation to Growth and to Competitiveness. What is it that is changing over time and how do we have to interpret that? And to set the stage, let me sort of take you straight away to the most global level I can possibly take you to. And that is to look at the long-term growth performance that we have been seeing before we got into this economic and financial crisis from 2000 to 2008, and the growth projections that we currently have from 2011 to 2016. And you see this for the your major regions and major economies in the world, and there are some really important and interesting trends to be seen here. If you first focus on the red lines, which is the performance from 2000 to 2008, and we're looking here at the growth of the real GDP, so it's gross domestic product corrected for inflation. Then we have seen that indeed the emerging economies have been kind of accelerating their growth enormously, not just China, even though China is a big deal, but also India, other developing Asia, and most other emerging economies have very significantly accelerated their growth until 2008. Now, if we then look forward, so we skip the 2009-2010 year for the moment, these are more the short-term forecasts, but we're going to sort of look forward to what is happening to 2011 to 2016. Obviously a tricky exercise, but actually what you're basically doing there is you take the sort of long-term demographic trends to translate them into sort of the labor force trends that we are expecting over the next 6-7 years. And then we make assumptions on the productivity growth of these economies based on their level of capital intensity, based on assumptions that we are making on technological progress, and so on and so forth. Now, what we see here, first of all, is that when we focus on the advanced economies, we actually see that most of the advanced economies are actually going to show significantly slower productivity growth, slower output growth, GDP growth, in going forward. Some of that being related to the fact that the labor force in advanced economies is going to slow significantly going to grow significantly less. We have an aging population, so the growth of the labor force will not be as rapid as what we have seen before 2008. But more important than that is that we are probably going to see a significant slowdown in productivity growth. Some of that related to the fact that the growth of innovation and the contribution of that innovation to productivity may not be as rapid as what it has been before 2008. So those are kind of the assumptions that are being made there. And it might slow growth of the advanced economies from about 3% to approximately 2.5% in terms of annual average growth rates. The emerging economies is a very diverse picture. Some emerging economies are actually accelerating their growth. India, for example, other developing Asia, except China, are countries where we actually expect that growth will accelerate. These countries have a huge potential that is still not yet realized, have actually had a consistent program of reforms, doing a lot of work on bringing new innovations and technology to a variety of sectors in their economy. But in many other cases, we actually see that emerging economies are also showing somewhat slower growth. Still very high. Look at the case of China, for example. China will see a slowing of maybe about 4 to 5% in terms of GDP growth compared to what it did before 2008. Still one of the fastest growing economies in the world, but not as rapidly as what we had seen before 2008. And most of the other emerging economies will also show somewhat slower growth, but still bringing emerging economies to roughly about 6% growth for the next 6 years. So that's kind of the global picture. There's a lot of debate about how you do these things exactly, and of course a big margin of uncertainty. But the point I really want to bring out to you is here that if we look at sort of the aggregates for the world economy, you actually think, well, there's not much of a difference. The world economy still tends to grow at about 4%, what it did from 2000 to 2008, and it still does. So what's going on here? Lots of economies are slowing in terms of growth, still the world economy growing at 4%. Well, the answer is simple. The shift of global production is shifting from these slower growing economies, the advanced world, towards these emerging economies that are taking a bigger share in the global economy. And that is exactly what you see in this chart. You see here the world divided up into different segments. And you can see how in 2000, the three blocks on the right-hand side, the US, the European Union, the most advanced European Union countries, and other advanced economies, were making up about 2/3 of global output. And the emerging and developing economies, the rest of the world, 1/3 of global output. Today, or in 2008, this was about 50-50. And in 6 years' time, if these projections that I was talking about, then in 6 years' time, the world will look just the other way around. It will be 2/3 of global output being produced in the emerging economies and only 1/3 of global output being produced in the advanced economies. That's kind of the pace at which these changes are taking place. And that, of course, is setting the stage for us in terms of where is that innovation